It's great to be here, and really want to thank Sherry for putting this together and bringing together such a wonderful group of people and thoughts and ideas. And I was excited this morning and during the earlier parts of the workshop to hear Allison and Alyosha and Daniel, all these ideas about curiosity and deep exploration. And so I just decided over lunch break to ask Claude to run some experiments for me. And this is what came out, the entire talk. It's really wonderful. So hot off the press, really, really right here. But before I get into the results and what real world play is, I just first want to address the fact that I've got a lot of robotics words on this slide. And some of my younger computer vision colleagues would probably accuse me of like decamping from computer vision to robotics or something like that. There's this whole existential debate about, is ICRA going to subsume CVPR, or is CVPR going to subsume ICRA? Or are we all getting absorbed into the amorphous NeurIPS mothership? So just indulge me with a bit of history. Well, first, look at this crazy cool thing from, I guess, the present, like humanoid robotics, computer vision for humanoid robotics, such a exciting vision. Obviously, I must have gotten this from some generative AI program, right? I'm sure there are a few people who are old enough in the room to know what this was. This is my textbook in computer vision when I was actually an undergrad, even a grad student and an undergrad. I was in the GRASP lab at the University of Pennsylvania, and this is Berthold Horn's textbook, which you look at it right now, it doesn't look like it has anything to do with robotics. It's all about shape from shading and optic flow and all the cool things. And that's what computer vision was when I first started. And then it took an amazing and very productive detour into internet vision, if you will. And that's where we got all the data to have these transformative data-centric advances, and whether by nearest neighbor or neural nets or LLMs. And so now I actually don't feel like it's a problem that vision and robotics are now intertwined. Action is, as I heard said at a CVPR workshop, is the most interesting modality. I'm not sure that's exactly right, but it's close. And so we're all excited about how things can work in the physical world. And the cool thing is they still are very broken. And so I think it's a great place to do research and finally solve a lot of the things that we want. And I am very much aligned with some of the previous speakers, including Alyosha, who focus on we need real world exploration. We need, I guess you called it deep data and play, curiosity and play. I had to explain to my graduate students what play was. It was really weird. And so now they know and they're excited about it. So I'll try and go through 4 things, and maybe I'll try and save a little bit of time. I won't have enough time to go through them in any detail. They're all fresh off the press archives that are either there now or will be there soon. And we'll start with some relatively low-level stuff, not quite world models, but focusing on the encoder side of things. Then I'll show off a very large collaboration with NVIDIA and Panasonic and others, led by my student Dantong New, on tactile VLAs. Not quite a world model, but very close to a world model. I think if you blink and wait until the end of the summer, it will be a world model, but it's not yet. But it really is focusing on the reactive, interactive, tactile part. I'm also so skeptical of all the vision-based teleoperation robot demos out there, and I'm a vision person, and I think it's not the way manipulation should be done. And hopefully you'll agree that T-Rex is exciting and pushing forward in the direction of what should be done. Then I'll tell you about a great paper led by Jiahui Lei and Chen Chen and Anju on world motion models, which takes ideas of 4D trajectories that we've been looking at in robotics and instantiates them as prediction of rigid motions, prediction of SE3 frames over time, an incredibly general method that I think is very exciting. And there are too many results for me to go through all of them, but I'll try and tease them for you. And then last but not least, I want to tell you about our revisiting of curiosity and play in the context of robotics. And I think it's fair to say that the idea of curiosity and intrinsic reward has been, investigated in every era of robotic models from the day that robotics was exploring a table of cells and you got a bonus for going to a new cell, to the era where policies were simple neural networks and you had an intrinsic bonus for exploring new regions. Alyosha really wonderfully summarized that work earlier today. But now we're in this era of language and prompts, and I think it's a new era for what curiosity can mean, and I think it's really exciting to have curiosity defined in a compositional space, in a language space, because I can suddenly say, I just saw someone hammer a nail into that block. Maybe I can go pick up that, soft thing and try and nail something else with it, and you'll discover it won't work, right? And that's much more powerful than exploration in a fixed dimensional vector space. Okay, so I'm probably already halfway through my talk, just to give you the introduction. So I'll plow through this and feel free to ask questions if you want. The first part is just about, let's make the visual encoder suck less. It's not like we didn't have these ideas in the past, but we seem to have forgotten them all with VLMs, because all of our encoders are basically clip-based and static. I'm going to ignore, there are plenty of video encoders in the world, and we talk about them in our related work section. But generally, if you say, let's see what happened between two images, you encode the image, and maybe you get a caption, and you encode the other image, and then you get a caption. And I guess the LLMs could compare what's changed in the encoded image, but we can all realize that that doesn't work in many useful cases. Like, there's something different between these two images. Probably you can find it, or them, the things, but you would probably have looked back and forth, right? And pretty much, surprisingly, all of the current approaches, or not all, but like 99% of the current approaches to VLMs, at least the ones that we know how they work, the open weight ones, don't have that capability. So we just added it in. It's actually a super simple idea, somewhat overlooked. Let's add cross-attention between pairs of an encoder, different images that are being encoded. And let's train it in a supervised way to look for state change. Right? So this is, we call this the stateful visual encoder. And so you might take a regular approach to visual encoding, which takes two different images, encodes it, passes it into an LLM, and instead we're going to allow learnable weights across different versions of an image. If you want to look for small changes in a medical image, in a geospatial image, or even in a clever scene, this can do the job much more efficiently than prior work. And so here, if you want to train a difference captioner, you actually can get all these small details. So we call it with successive video frames. I'm sorry, could you say that?
Why not do it also with successive video frames?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think there's ever been a two-frame video encoder. And so there's a lot of relation in these ideas, but there was certainly nothing that just actually worked. Yeah, to our knowledge. But it should, it's too simple an idea, but it hadn't been done before. And in general, you want to make this agentic so that you'll have something which will go back and select a particular frame to compare. The version that we've released already is just a two-frame. You can think of it as a degenerate video encoder. It's like a two-frame video encoder. But it's also trained for specific tasks. And so a video encoder might not have generally been trained for or fine-tuned for downstream tasks as much as this.
Do you align the images?
Nope. I don't think so. Check the paper out for all the different architectures that were considered. Cross-attention plus a feed-forward layer was selected. There are even a lot of implementation details in that. I won't go through the details. The students, of course, wanted to run every possible experiment they could think of to have a very big table, different resolutions, different LLM sizes, different VLM backbones. It's a pretty general finding. It worked across all of them. And the three real-world tasks that we highlighted were medical imaging, trying to describe small changes in medical images. This is a image generation task where it says, let's replace the person with a large rock, but it needs to refer both conceptually and spatially to something, and a geospatial image differencing task. All of these showed improvements quantitatively. You can look at the tables in the thing. And I also want to refer, there's also a second project that's related but unsupervised instead of supervised. led by Roy, who's in the room right now, where instead of fine-tuning across attention layer, this basically said, let's revisit CLIP or SIGLIP and Dino, and notice that people have forgotten to train these models to be sensitive to affordance, right? And we know what actions are happening. We can track actions, and we can hopefully find a representation that's more like this, which pays attention to the action in the scene, not necessarily sort of the semantics of, text related to objects in the scene, or just a general unsupervised measure that's not paying attention to action and dynamics. So those two works will eventually be combined. And both of them will eventually roll into this cool project that's a lot of eye candy, also a very large team. I'll show the full author list on the final slide, but these are the lead grad students, many entities, a lot of contribution from NVIDIA. And this is trying to really push the state of the art in dexterous manipulation, which I've been adjacent to my whole career. I started off in the GRASP lab, but this is probably the first time I've actually seriously been leading a project that's pushing the state of the art, and it's really fun. We want to do all these things, and obviously current robots have a hard time doing it, and I would argue vision-based teleop is not going to solve this, and we want robots that can do things like this, literally plug the light bulb in. This is our DexMate robot with Sharpa hands. These hands have individual activated fingers, and they have tactile feedback on each finger. There's been a great history of progress in foundation models, starting with text, going all the way to vision VLAs. I'm sure you're all familiar with the state of the art, but I think the conventional wisdom is that this is the wrong approach. Tactile is not the way to go. All the big companies investing all the money don't think it's going to be useful to try and, they've invested so much money in the baseline architectures. I think they're hoping it's going to work. And I would argue that we need to learn in the real world, and we definitely need to learn with tactile. This paper doesn't fully, it's still TBD to prove out learning in the real world and the world model part of this. But here, what I think we've shown is the tactile part, even keeping the teleoperation fixed, is important. And you need tactile representations to do fast dynamic manipulation. You need a dual process architecture, slow and fast. I think I see Jitendra's talk tomorrow. The title probably suggests a similar story. And the current VLAs are often monolithic. There's some nice exceptions to that work, especially Jitendra's earlier work on video recognition. My former student Hwase Shu's work last year on slow, fast visual tactile policies is very much on point for this. And the architecture we have built has a lot of similarities to that slow, fast tactile VLA with some important differences. And the key is that you do want your tactile expert to be running at a faster frame rate than your action expert. And the real innovation is in this large project was both a model, a new data set, basing it on previous egocentric pre-training data, and then also setting up a hard challenge problem, because most of the existing challenges were designed to be solvable by the vision-only model, right? The data set might be the most important contribution here, although I think both of them are very cool. This is the platform, you saw it before, and collecting data in this platform is very painful. It inspires me to move beyond teleoperation as the paradigm for most things, because it's extremely expensive to just even get a human being to teleop this and get something to work. Nonetheless, we did it, collected what we're calling a rich mid-training data set, where the previously available data had vision-only modalities, and we now have tactile modalities. And so we can train the tactile experts on top of a model that's initialized with the vision-only modalities and get the following kinds of results. I'll skip to the videos and play them for a little bit. You saw the light bulb. It's pretty cool. I don't think we broke too many of them. We used real eggs in the following example, and we definitely broke eggs, and I was terrified by that, because I'm like, we spilt eggs on these hands that are that expensive? But I guess they cleaned it off and it kept working. The head view, wrist view, and Other wrist view are obviously used, and the tactile pad displays are the perceptual inputs to the model. The third view, I think, is just for visualization. We have wiping plate. We have applying toothpaste. This requires squeezing the tube and putting it on the thing. We didn't ask the robot to brush its teeth. That would have been fun. This is like selecting one cup out of a stack of cups, which requires you to sort of pull it apart. This is like actually recognizing the tactile pattern, the semantics of the tactile pattern, and putting it in one of a certain number of boxes. So this is more like what the traditional tactile tasks were, and I didn't have time to really go into detail about the particular spatiotemporal tactile encoder, which we think is key to dynamic reactions if you're trying to detect slip or other kinds of dynamic effects that the roboticists have known about for decades, but were not present in the contemporary VLA architectures, and we hope they are now.
Is this a predefined set of actions?
No. It's all end-to-end learned. The last part of the project, the last talk will be will have primitives, the Agentic. This is VLA world, moving towards world models. And then I'll switch to agentic robotics in the last part of the talk, which will be a bit of a head spin for me as well. A lot of co-authors on this paper. We sort of started this in December and had all of this happen. Okay, so this is a world model workshop, and I really want to show off this exciting work on 4D world models. Last year, I gave a talk at RSS and really argued for 4D representations, that we now have this ability to extract 3D representations over time from everyday video. It's really exciting. But if you look at if you look at a dense field of 4D traces, it's challenging to process all that. And Jiahui and Zhenchen, really led by Anju. Jiahui's a co-postdoc between Anju and I. And I was excited to help out on this project. Built a very general model for moving beyond 4D trajectories to 4D frames. And I think it's well known to everyone that the world is made up of, can be well approximated by rigid motions. And we don't necessarily need to generate all the pixels in the world if we could figure out what all the 4D trajectories are. And in fact, we don't probably need every single 4D point in the world. But if we could figure out what's happening as a set of rigid motion frames, well, that's a pretty general representation that covers many, many different things in the world and in robotics. And so that's what we did. And there's plenty of work that this approximation can be useful in many ways. Let's see so the world motion model is a general framework to predict pose sequences represented as SE3 frames, where it can be a general, just like a world model can be a general progression of pixel values over time, independent of task. This is independent of task. It can model many, many different families of rigid motions that correspond to different kinds of scene configurations. And in this paper, we have a single architecture that we train on specific tasks. It's future work to have a single set of weights for all the tasks, but we believe that's in our roadmap. And the architecture can support many different types of inference, from predicting the future conditioned on the past to predicting the future conditioned on the past given a selected action. Oh, somehow I started entering text in the text field. To predicting, to infilling the motion given the start and the end configurations, or to retargeting from one morphology to another. In the interest of time, how much time do I have left? 10 minutes, okay. Then maybe I can touch on each of the results. And there's a particular architecture that handles all of this, that is relatively efficient to train, and can generate the kind of results that we see here. starting with a language table demo where the model is given the position of all the rigid objects in the scene and some text, and tries to predict what's going to happen to them, how they're going to move, how the goal may be achieved by this end effector. For example, if the task is move the red balloon roughly beneath the yellow pentagon, or to the bottom of the yellow pentagon, then that's what happens. Here's another example. Push the red pentagon diagonally up and to the left. Here's a version with MPC where it rolls out several candidate trajectories and picks the one that's going to actually achieve the goal most appropriately, or with most success. I'll touch on, that was just this one result. That we have results in predicting 4D trajectories, predicting body-object interaction, predicting retargeting of tracked human motion to robot motion, to hand-object interaction, and to manipulator motion planning. Maybe I'll try and just do 2 or 3 of these in the interest of time, because I do want to go to get the last part done. This is 4D trajectory planning, the TraceGen database, and there's quantitative comparisons there. I'm not going to try and explain this in detail. Here's modeling all the different kinematic frames in the parts of a human body, plus interacting with another object in the scene, in this case, a box. This is an Osmo task. And here's the kind of inference we have of what's expected to happen in this world model. Again, a world model over the configuration of rigid frames. Here's a comparison to some of the prior work. Ours seems to have fewer problems. And here's the example of human-humanoid retargeting. That, of course, means we have examples of a robot configuration and a corresponding human configuration for all the different poses. And we have a data set of that. And then someone gives us human motion tracking, and we want to kind of make the robot act. This is a very popular topic right now. And here's the results that you can get just by applying this very general world motion model compared to special purpose solutions that are kind of state of the art, using Twist plus GMR or FUMA to retarget. Here's another example. Here's an example. Let me see if I can get back and have that video load properly. Okay. Here's an example where a video is taken, the pose is tracked, and then the pose is retargeted. And this is retargeting with our method, and this is retargeting with a baseline method that's based on physics simulation instead of a data-driven world model. The next one is funny. They took a picture of me giving a talk, my students did, a year or 2 ago, and animated it so that I would dance across the stage like a ballerina. Oh, shit. What happened? It worked when I played it just a minute ago. Oh, is that one on the web? I turn off the web so I don't get any stuff, but okay, well, you can watch it that way. So, oh, you can't, can you? Apologies. I had the exact same problem when I gave the talk last week, and I thought I'd fixed it. Okay, great. So I'm dancing. It's so cute. And then they track that motion, and I don't know, pretty funny. And also, hand-object interaction. All right, I have probably 5 minutes left. Okay, good. Let me get to the last part of this talk. Playful robotic agent teams. I mean, so there've been a couple gear shifts already in this talk, and now we're going to switch to the sort of other part of the robotics literature that's very exciting right now. That's almost a complete reversal from VLAs or world models. But it's it's touching on the playful curiosity theme in this workshop, so it's interesting. And also a collaboration with many colleagues, and just sort of built out over the last, I don't know, 5 or 6 months. And this is agentic robotics, where people are basically inspired by Claude Code and saying, let's forget about VLAs, let's just ask Claude Code to solve the problem. And let's give Claude Code the manual on a classic robotics toolbox. Let's just give it ROS, and let's give it a bunch of primitives like pickup object, and go. And a verifier, so it knows if it's, and we'll just let it run overnight until it works. In the real world, you have to solve the problem of a reset, or environment reset. In simulation, this is obviously very successful and trivial. And so code as policies is the theme. And I think we can argue about it. There are pros and cons. People love its interpretability. People love you might be able to prove things about it. I'm skeptical that the primitives, I'm skeptical that having a complete isolation between primitives and non-primitives is the right way to go, but it's clear that this is an interesting approach, and eventually I think it'll be part of the solution. But just to, again, explain the code as policies paradigm that was prior work, it's just basically saying, let's use a VLM, ask it to write some code to solve the problem that's presented to the robot, like stack the blocks on the empty bowl, and it's Claude Code, or it was Palm before that when it was Saycan. It can figure out, or maybe I think I might have gotten the wrong reference there, but you know what I mean. It can basically say, well, if I want to do something, first let's find the primitive, let's grasp it, let's pick it up, let's move it over there, all that good stuff. And people have been pushing on that. So how does play come in here? Well, play comes in, I think, very naturally, and it's even more leverage than it's been in the past, because there's already a series of 2 or 3 papers along this line, and they're all of the same form, which is like, well, I've got a set of tasks, let's try the set of tasks. Maybe let's do transfer, let's reuse skills, but the models still become brittle. And I think the exciting point is to revisit play and curiosity-driven intrinsic, or curiosity and intrinsic rewards in this setting, where we say, let's actually have these agentic policies try and build skills without necessarily having extrinsic reward. And the VLM, and I think an interesting observation is the VLMs are already powerful enough to just look at a scene, even without any prompt as to what the expected tasks are, and figure out some things that would be useful to try as play tasks. And then certainly you can also prompt them with a general category of like, you might have to hammer things in the future. Why don't you go practice some tasks that might be fun? That also, of course, will work as well. And so we built this architecture called RATS. I don't know, a weird word for a playful thing, but it gets your attention. And we basically just said, let's do agentic robotics with the idea of increasing our generalization ability by having a play period where the robotic agent system doesn't know what tasks it's going to have, but it has to look at the scene and say, what might I have to do? Or even after it's had 1 or 2 tasks, it can still play and say, what variation do I think I might need in the future? I think, I'm not sure who said this in the past, but it seems obvious to me now that play is really key to generalization. And I think if you don't have play in this type of system, you probably won't generalize as effectively to new settings. And we all know that robotics right now suffers from, a real generalization problem. So we offer this as an antidote. I think you can get the sense from this slide of how it works. And these are basically tabletop. A lot of these are simulated environments. But it sees the scene and it says, hey, maybe I should practice stacking these things. Maybe I should practice opening these drawers. And it learns skills that it can then put into its skill library even before it gets the first task. And the task proposing is done using, and we can even now just put prompts in to say, let's have an intrinsic reward that balances learnability and novelty, and you should get bored of things that you're doing well at. It's a brave new world of agentic robotics. And I'm probably now out of time. And so I think I won't go through all of these details. I will just kind of summarize that it gets the strongest performance of any method right now on the various leaderboards for this kind of problem. And there are details of whether we use our learned. And there are actually two contributions in this paper. One is the idea of play, and the other idea is a robotic agent team that has an even stronger verifier than the prior work, and they both turn out to be very important, and they get the best performance together. And we compare it against a baseline where the same amount of computation is used for random search instead of this guided play, and we show that we outperform in that task. So that's it, and I'm excited to have told you about all these things today, kind of improving the front end to make models that look at the world more affordance-centric and stateful. Very excited about bringing multimodality and tactile vision, fast reactive models for manipulation. The world motion model work is general and powerful, and I'm excited to reintroduce play to my students and have them at least teach their students to have fun, their robots to have fun, and they should have fun as well. And I enjoyed all of these projects. Thank you very much. One or two questions over there.
Cool talk. I was curious about the verification you mentioned at the end with rats. Like, how do you verify if play was successful? So it almost seems like contradictory.
The play proposer proposes a task, which might be put the Coke can inside the drawer. And the VLM says, is the Coke can in the drawer at the end of the episode? And it can tell.
The setup reminds me a lot of the Voyager paper, which I think did something at least like intuitively similar in like a Minecraft environment.
Mm-hmm.
But I think in that paper it wasn't framed as play; it was just framed as like exploring like things you can do in the environment. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm curious if there's anything here that you think like especially evokes the intuitive idea of playfulness.
Yeah, I haven't looked at that paper in a while, so I might need to check. But I mean, certainly the prompt, the particular way you prompt the agent to explore things that might be interesting, the fact that you ask it to, we compared a few different algorithms, either prompt-based or based on a score function that said if you're capable at something, obviously don't keep doing it. So there are exploration bonuses, but I think it's a good topic for discussion as well.
Can part of robotics become just prompt engineering? You look at the scene and you say, okay, how do I cross all those obstacles? So you ask ChatGPT, how do I cross? Here's a picture, how do I cross? And it says, go there, and then there, and then you actually try it with your robot.
Is that a comment or a question?
It's a question.
I think it's a comment. I think it's true.
Why
You can
do
see I don't
everything in a
invest
trial
all
and
my
error?
time into
Why do
that.
everything in a trial and error way? Why not use the expertise of
Well, this captures expertise, does it not? And eventually, I do think you want to combine all these things.
Is there something that you can't?
Sorry?
Is there something that you can't do it with language with robotics? You think, or you think you do everything with a language prompt? Anything in robotics can you do with language, like tire?
Oh, no, I would not think that.
What's the limit of this language-based play?
Well, look, I would expect to have a model that that could also do imagination with a multimodal prompt. Been very interested in that, and there are plenty of image generation stories where you may want to describe an image not just with text, but with some tokens that are describing things that text doesn't describe well. Or you might have prior image examples. So I think if we allow ourselves to have I'm not committed to text, although this version is only text. In general, I would say it's a multimodal language.
Is there any real examples for rats?
There are, but only a few. So I mean,
My feeling is that, Michal, that all this language stuff, because it doesn't have any data on the real world, it's going to be not so good in the real world.
But here language is just
specifying trial and error.
Here language is just specifying the goal.
I don't know.
Why not save a lot of trial and error by using expertise of an observer?
But the observer is not grounded. The observer just read it in the book.
Well, I don't know which books you read, but
I know it when I see it. It's a question in the back.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting when you said that you're not convinced that decoupling the primitives from the planning is going to generalize well enough. I'm wondering.
And I think that's what Alyosh is getting at. I mean, maybe we should just repeat that. Like, I think eventually you need to learn from the real world, especially the primitives, right? And this architecture doesn't really do that yet. It relies on a fixed set of primitives that's someone else collected. And so future work would, I think, blur that boundary.
Yeah, and I was going to ask, like, is this basically kind of like more or less like a roadmap that you in the future foresee stacking together? So learning the primitives maybe from something like scaling human data or Telia.
Well, this thing learns primitives. So I just need to figure out how to get all my students to work together, and all my collaborators to work together, but it's impossible.
I see. So essentially, like, for generalization, you believe all these things are going to be needed to be combined. Is that correct?
Sounds like a good idea. I'm not sure how to do that yet, but someone should do it. Roy.
Okay, so I have a question. So Shimon Ullman showed earlier today about the concept that before humans pick up language, they pick up like more, you call it conceptual paradigms. So I wonder how it looks like when it comes to the develop robotic models.
Well, this is completely independent of language. I think you could build a language, there's a language conditioning on here, but it's not, it works perfectly well with in an unconditioned model. So in my ideal world, figuring out how to combine these, you might learn this before you learn language, right? If you want a developmentally plausible story, learn how to predict rigid motion in the world before you worry about tasks. And you might be able to make a version of rats that never uses a single text token, but just based on watching how 3D things in the world, like I'm sure there are certain animal species who don't have written language or don't even have a very limited language, but they can play and imagine new tasks. Probably they're maybe an expert in the room would know, like I've seen talks on birds able to come up with new schemes to do things. And so that's all there is here, is that in some language space, you say, maybe I could bounce the ball and put it through that hole instead of bouncing the ball through the hole that was demonstrated to me. And I think that could be done in a language space that's purely WMM in the future. Although right now, I think it's all done in a text space.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you.
This concludes our public offering of the day. Please come join us tomorrow. If you're